Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dark Matter as well as the latest episode of Wynonna Earp. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Dark Matter, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Wynonna Earp. But the first thing we want to talk about is this week's episode of Dark Matter. A very good episode with some interesting twists, turns, and developments. Obviously, break things down bit by bit. First thing is, obviously, we had the return of Victor, finding out what it is that he wanted. I appreciate the whole conversation that Android had with the crew at the beginning. It's like, oh yeah, like I kind of thought Victor would have called me before now because I thought we had a thing, and just kind of like 6 and 2 having that look on their face like, oh wow, and just kind of smiling like, oh that's kind of cute. It really is. I really like how the android was saying, like, helping them out and everything, because it's like, I don't really ask for much. It's like, no, she doesn't. She never asks for anything. It's just like, oh, I'm going to help the crew and everything. It's like, oh, that's what I do, because not just because of a job situation. It's like, where I stand in this crew. I am a part of the crew, so I'm going to help out. So they're helping out with the Victor situation because they killed, there was a girl with them, Anya. They ended up killing her owner. Which even immediately then I was like, yeah, something's fishy about the situation. Especially when before Anya started talking, she looked to Victor for like confirmation. I'm like, okay, you're lying about this. I don't know what you're lying about. But then he starts doing things anyway. He messed with that other robot. Like he pulled out his humanity chip. And the moment he came back online, he was like, oh yeah, I'm dysfunctional. I guess I'm going to have to deactivate myself, and killed himself. And obviously Anya didn't say anything because she ended up killing herself because she's like, oh, I'm the reason why the GA's been able to track us down and stuff. I'm in danger if you guys stay with me, if I stay here. So she killed herself essentially. All for the purpose of later on it's even more messed up because you end up finding out the one that was a tracker all along was Victor. So it just makes the matter even worse. Oh, because on top of it, he's already a scumbag doing very, misleading things because the dude had woken up. He's like, no, the other android had woken up. He's like, no, this is wrong. Because later on we found out Victor snapped the dude's neck and killed him just because. And it seemed like he wasn't there to hurt Anya. It's like he wanted her back. It almost seemed like it's not a situation like, oh, I want you back. You're my property. It's almost like, I care about you. Please come back. I'll find some way to help you, and killed him. I guess, is a situation as we know, there is a android revolution coming. So I'm guessing in that situation, it's we can't have you going off to anyone else about this. So might as well get rid of the problem now. So, but that's why I was kind of why is Anya still willing to follow him? I guess for her, it's oh, you set me free. But legitimate, and it looked like he was trying. I mean, granted, we don't know what kind of owner he was. Maybe he was a terrible person, but it looked like he was very caring at the very least. Either way, it shows you the fact is that Victor outright killed him and just lied about the entire situation. So that puts any credibility he has down the toilet. So he's still telling the android that she shouldn't stay with the crew. It's oh, they'll never accept you. It's stop trying to put thoughts in her head the crew's always accepted her. I always felt there will be a point in time when they will not accept her. Just kind of feel with everything we saw from the future episode, it makes it seem like she definitely isn't around them anymore, especially when Five's like, oh, you're here. Oh, you're from a different time, aren't you? Well, it kind of makes sense because it's the android must not be around with them anymore. So the crew went their separate ways. We don't know what happened, who lives, who dies, and what led to said circumstances for her to be the only one left on Araza. But kind of speaking of her memories and everything, it's kind of interesting when we dive deeper because Victor was able to kind of unlock her memories. Much like the others, her memory is still somewhere, stored somewhere. She just doesn't have access to it. So basically, we kind of saw some flashbacks, and obviously we saw when Portia killed the other two people in the ship because it ended up because I forgot who it was. So it was someone recently brought that up in conversation, oh yeah, where are the other two people at? It's what are you talking about? Yeah, there were two other people in this ship. Whatever happened to them? It's It's oh, they got killed. Basically, because they didn't like the fact is that Portia was making the android the one that kind of controlled the Raza, and it's one of the dudes that's this is my ship, and I love 3 the entire time the fight's happening between Portia and the two, he's just sitting there eating, and she's like, so you have a problem? He's like, nah, you want to do what you want to. I was rooting for you the entire time. I was I like just setting that little moment up of just being yeah, showed you how indifferent they were to each other, not really caring that much. It's hey, you started some shit, you handle it yourself. I'm not gonna get involved. Let me enjoy my meal in peace. But also there's the moment Five was working on an android to make her more, I guess special, to the way that Portia wanted her to be, and she's come on, like, because, you know, 5 is like, because, like, she's like, can we, like, because Portia was like, can we close our eyes? And Emily's like, what are you talking about? You know, it's like, she's like, well, they look kind of empty, and I don't like that. And she's like, well, she's just a machine. She's like, no, she's not. She's like, she's more than that. And initially I was like, okay, obviously Portia's going to say that because, like, she has her nanites and everything, so she's kind of, like, not human herself, so she doesn't want to be treated like just a machine, so she's not going to treat the android as just a machine. Which then immediately later on with the reveal and everything, it's like, no, it makes a lot more sense why she felt like that. Obviously with the whole Irina situation, which I'll get to in a second. But that kind of brings up the conversation of, she never actually, Emily never knew the truth prior, did she? Because, like, the fact that she made that comment, like, I don't know. Maybe she never knew at that time. Like, it seemed like, I think the rest of the Raza, at least most of the Raza, probably knew about Portia's whole nanite situation, and maybe Emily just didn't know, but nevertheless. And since I brought it up, though, I will get right into it. We ended up finding out, because this is all about, you know, them tracking down the androids, finding sanctuary. It's supposed to be a place that all androids can go to be kind of find a safe haven and stuff like that. And it seems like it's the same person who created the upgrades, which makes them more human, and it's actually the person who created androids in the first place. And it turns out that person is Irina, who actually looks exactly like the android, and it seems that she used to be part of a dwarf star. She actually had part to play in Rebecca's, or Portia or Rebecca. She's got like 3 different names, but let's just go with 2. She had to do with 2's creation. They were actually very close. She's the reason why 2 kind of escaped initially. So initially 2 came to be with her after like, you know, because Irina knew she couldn't stay there long, like had to find a safe haven for them, and so that's where this whole place represented. And I also love the reveal that's like, yeah, you guys had a relationship, and 2 was like, well, what do you mean by relationship? And then the dude Chase, the android Chase, was kind of like, well, and then 2 and the android look at each other, and it's like, well, and android's like, well, this is awkward. It's like, wow. Because it turns out Irina was sick, you know, but she still wanted to kind of make this a home for the androids. Some came, stayed for a while, but eventually left, you know, because she wanted to give them all free will is what she wanted, because she was tired of androids being treated as just machines. It's like they didn't have that free will, that choice like humans did. And she was like, it was far beyond time for that to happen. So she started sending out code, that being the upgrade, so that it would spread more and get to different androids. So, but it turns out that the android that we know, which turns out her name is Suki, as the reason why she exists is because 2 created her. At first it seems like, okay, it's meant to be as a replica, a way to keep Irina with her in some shape or form, which then it's like, okay, now it makes sense why the android is more than a machine. It's like, that's why Portia cared so much for the android, you know. But then again, it turns out that in actuality, Portia back then wanted to create the android. The reason why she looks exactly like Irina isn't just for Portia's own sake of like, oh, wanting to keep a piece of her. It was eventually supposed to be a vessel for Irina to inhabit and make the body her own. That's specifically why. And it's like, oh, so even more reason why it's not just a machine. So I just thought that was kind of a very beautiful reveal, just the sentiment of what it meant. Kind of learning more about the android's past in the sense of why she was made the way she did. And I did appreciate the fact that it did affect the android. She's like, no, I'm okay. And 6 is talking to her, and she's like, she doesn't know why it's affecting her the way it does. And it's like, because for her, she's like, it does make her feel like she's inferior. Like, I'm the imperfect model. I was just made a copy of someone that was already better. Someone, you know, else, you know, I'm just a lowly copy, which 6 is like, no, like, there's nothing wrong with being imperfect. Imperfect is fine. Like, look at me. And she's like, oh, that's a great example. He's like, well, I didn't mean for you to kind of say it like that. Like, it being a great example. It's an example, not a great example. But, it's a sense of like, the fact is your flaws are what make you unique. And it's like your little quirks and everything about you is what makes you you. You're not just a copy of someone. You're your own person. And he's like, 6 is like, that's what we love about you. And I'm like, oh, the feels, the crew love it's so good. I love it. And then like she's like, thank you, 6. And even 5 repeats it later on, because like, you know, the android's like, I want to be more human. And 5's like, what? No, you're perfect the way you are. Like, we like you the way you are. You don't need to change for anyone. And it's just that beautiful moment I thought was just kind of even to the point like Chase is like, oh yeah, like the fact of the matter is there might be some, like he wanted to change the android, and 5 was like, essentially 5 was like, fuck you, you're not changing her. She's going to stay the way she is. Like, at the end of the day, it's not your choice, it's her. It's like, I don't care. You're not changing her, and if you better not try to do anything to do it. Because at first she was like, oh, it's like, because she saw Chase, she's like, oh, Aaron, but it's like, no, it's Chase, because apparently there are multiple models that look like. That's just so interesting to me that that's the case. That, I mean, I guess it would make sense. I mean, I guess on some level you would think there would be, I guess there are different mass-produced looking androids, and obviously, you know, the android looks the way she does because of Irina, so. But it was just kind of a cool thing. And this was also a big episode for 3 too, because like 3 had his whole opinion. It's like, oh, we can't trust them. They're androids. They're like, yeah, but what about our android? And they're basically, everyone's making fun of them. And like, it was like either 2 or 5 was like, go ahead and say it. And then 3's kind of laughing while he says, it's like, but our android is different. It's like, he talks shit about other androids, but he loves their android. Because even to the point, like, if she was like, oh, maybe I should, you know, restore my systems. Like, what's it expected? Season 1 or 2, maybe? I think it was definitely season 1 then. Because that was when she was having issues, like, of who she was. And she was asking, like, oh, do you think I should restart myself? And he's like, no, whoa. She's like, okay, I'll go back to my base program. And he's like, no. It's like, no, this I'm gotten used to. I don't need you changing up things. So it's like, obviously over time, like, he's easily warmed up to her. But he does even apologize to her later. He's like, you know, I've had my preconceived notions of androids and stuff like that. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sorry if I've ever made you feel bad. Obviously, I had my problems with Victor and stuff like that. Which, honestly, I think 3 felt something there. The reason why he didn't trust him. Rightfully so. Like, Victor was shady as shit. But it was kind of sweet for him to apologize and stuff like that. Because it's like, you know... And she's like, oh, that's super nice of you. She's like, the fact of the matter is, you speak what's on your mind, you know, without consequence. And he's like, yeah. But she's like, oh, yeah, but, you know, we're kind of both the same in that retrospect. And she's like, that's what I like about you. And she attempts to smile. And he's like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm smiling. Am I doing it wrong? He's like, no, you're doing it right. And I also appreciate the fact is he poured her a drink. And it's like, yeah, move that hot chocolate aside. Drink this. And she drinks a little bit. Puts it down, slides it over to him, and gets her hot chocolate back, and it's just like, yeah, it's an acquired taste. I love the bonding. It's such a cute, adorable, and amazing aspect. I mean, I love it in any series, but I really appreciate it. And it's like moments like that when you just see, when you think about who they were complete strangers in season 1, and to see them have grown as tight and as caring as they are, no matter what kind of issues they've had, like to be where they are, you know, especially with the whole Six situation, they've easily brought Six back into the fold, and he's easily just as much a part of the family after everything that went down with like, oh, his betrayal and everything. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting, just to see them grow like that, which in itself makes it even sadder when you think about the fact is that they will eventually break apart. The way they are now cannot last forever, whatever the circumstances may be. And kind of along those lines of the android, it was kind of that interesting moment where Rio is talking to her, like he's giving her pudding or something. She's trying to describe it. He's like, no, tell me, how does it really make you feel? And she's like, I don't get it. Like, you're being so kind to me. He's like, well, why wouldn't I? He's like, the fact of the matter is, you're just as much as this crew as anyone else. Which in kind of, when you go back in retrospect, like last season, Rio didn't stop treating her any different, even when he got his memories back. Even as 4, like the moment he got his memories back, he was still kind to the android, because it's like, you know, there was always a part of him that was like, you are a part of this crew. You were much a member as us. Rio was... It's kind of interesting, Rio being who he is, when you actually look in retrospect. Like, I mean, it was actually his decision. Like, he kind of broke the tie on, like, we should keep, like, you know, Emily around. But this episode also brought up a situation of like, oh yeah, they can make bodies and stuff like that, like implanting people's minds. It's like, oh, we can do that with Sarah, which I thought was kind of an interesting development, because because part of me was worried. I was like, oh man, I hope like 2 isn't going to try and do what Portia originally wanted and put, you know, Irina's brain inside the android Suki, but it was like, no, but I have a better idea. We can make an android that looks just like Sarah and implant her brain in it, which 3 was all for, because it's like, hey, you wanted to get out of here, you wanted to kind of be part of the real world, you need it more than this. And like, hey, it's like, how do you feel about it? It's like, it doesn't matter what I feel about it. This is all about what you want, you know. That's what 3 is telling Sarah. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. I was actually scared for a second when, I mean, well, rightfully so, when they ended up taking, she's like, oh, the process will take a while. The GA's here and everything. We have to go now. So don't worry, the process will be done. So it's done. Sarah wakes up and everything is like, yay. I was like, oh, I was so sure you guys are going to do something bad, which they kind of do, because Victor's like, yeah, we're going to need, yeah, it's a good thing that you have a human's mind, because we're going to need your help. So it's not even a situation of like, oh, they need to upgrade her. It's like, no, from the very beginning, she already has a human intellect, so she can kind of, she has the power of an android, but the mind of a human. She can process stuff like an android, but she has the free will and consciousness of a human to do whatever she wants. And in fact, this is like, so now we're playing into the whole storyline of the whole Android revolution. So now the question begins, like, because we, like I said, we saw the situation with the android kind of sliced up on the table, like looking into the future. Is that because she ends up getting mixed up in the whole Victor situation again, or is this because of like Irina kind of does some things? Well, I feel like Irina's sick, and you know, I didn't really talk about it, but 2 gave her some of her nanites. It's like, well, we've tried this before. It's like, well, this is a Gen 2 nanite, so maybe it'll last longer. You know, it seems like it's a temporary fix for now. So, I don't know. It does seem like Android Revolution is on its way, and maybe this is us going to take Irina toward taking leaps to becoming the antagonist, because it seems like I mean, not less it's just Victor himself kind of doing this, but I feel like Irina's probably backing him up in that whole thing. Like, probably tired of humans, because for Irina, like, this body of hers is running low on time anyway, so she might try and sneak and get the android's body anyway, you know, because it's like, oh, she was ready to leave her human body behind, especially because, like, the fact of the matter is, you take someone like 2 anyway, 2 isn't human. I mean, granted, she said, like, you know, our story already had its ending, but I feel like there's still something there, so we'll see whether anything comes about it or not. Like I said, a very, very good episode, with some very interesting developments, and I'm very interested to see where said developments take us in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Wynonna Earp, a very good episode, with a lot of stuff that went down. First of all, I thought was kind of interesting. Well, first of all, let's talk about how much a badass Wynonna is. Like, even though she's pregnant, going up against Waverly, doing backflips and shit like that, it's like, even pregnant, she still kicks a major ass. That should come as no surprise, but it's like, holy crap, I'm surprised you can move like that. I guess perks of being the air and everything. But nevertheless, I thought it was kind of interesting that her and Dolls kept quiet about the whole, like, ring situation with Doc, that being, like, the last seal. But then again, in retrospect, I'm like, okay, I'm guessing the reason why they kept quiet about that, because we ended up finding out Wynonna's plan. It's like, oh, let's break the seal so that, you know, Clutie will wake up. I put him down. Lo and behold, like, it's settled. Like, the curse is done with and everything. And so I guess if he, so that's why I guess she kept it from the rest of the group. But at the same time, it's like, because she didn't tell Waverly about it or anyone else. The only person that knows is Dolls. And even that part of her plan, I don't even think she told Dolls about, because I'm sure Dolls would be like, no, that's crazy. Much like Doc did. So, because Doc and her having dinner and everything, it's like, oh man, this is like this must be a discussion about the baby. Oh, it's like, no, it's about the ring and everything. And it's like, oh, just lose the ring and I'll break the seal. It's like, I can't lose the ring. It's like, you know, because it's tied to my immortality. It's like, you're not immortal. You just won't age. And I guess, like, she never directly said it. She did mention, like, oh, this is about the baby, you know, this is about our baby. So it's like a situation I think, like, Wynonna's kind of loosely saying, like, he doesn't need that immortality, because it's like, you need to be a normal human. Like, I know you don't want to fit, you think you're like, you know, obviously they got heated because of that doll situation. That was really creepy, and I was wondering how that was going to be implemented in the episode, but then, like, they started getting more and more heated. I'm like, oh, the doll's kind of making it more and more heated, to the point that they would, you know, end up doing something to each other. But, like, first the doll kind of stood up in the, like it was beside the little girl, then it moved up to the front of the painting, then it disappeared, it was on top of a cabinet, and then it became human-sized and was standing behind them without them realizing it. So I just thought it was kind of an interesting aspect. But I guess it's like, for Wynonna, it's like, you could be a normal human, grow old, you know, that's kind of the whole business, like growing old with your child, like being a human again. It's like, because to her, she's throwing it at him like, you're being selfish again. You could have given up your ring back then, but you didn't, and end up even revealing to her, you know, the person who tried to save you? Yeah, it was actually both. It was one Robert, aka Bobo. If you had not done, like, him giving up that ring could have changed everything. So there's a part to play in that situation too. So, and then you see it kind of messing with Doc's head. It's like, he's the reason why I didn't get out. He was that stranger that, you know, could have helped me but didn't. I mean, you ended up finding out more about, like, why that was such torture for him too. It's like, not only was he in there for a very long time, it's also because of what it represented too. Now, he says that. Now, I don't know whether to interpret that as, like, Constance knew exactly what she was doing and the reason why she did that, or it just happened to like, it's the extra reason why that situation sucked. But basically, he was 14 and he snuck underneath like the floors of their house and ended up overhearing his mom like being sick. She had tuberculosis. She was crying as she was praying, and overhearing that, being in such a tight space, reminded him of that. So that's why the well situation was even harsher for him, because it reminded him. That's why he has like a problem with tight spaces, is because of that particular, like, you know, it combined with a traumatic event of like something like that, you know. So I mean, granted, that's what that painting situation was about, which is kind of interesting. But also, what does that mean for like the guy who ran the store? Like, obviously, he's some kind of monster too. Granted, we don't know what yet, so maybe he'll be kind of dealt with in the future. I don't know. Like, it makes you wonder. Like, I mean, he knew who Doc was immediately. It's like, because Wynonna's like, it brings a lot of demons their way, because they're like, so it's a lot of the demons that found their way to them, all technically Doc's fault, because the reason why they found their way to is because maybe that's why specifically a lot of monsters are kind of relocated towards the triangle. It's because they've been secretly drawn to the seal. It draws evil. So I mean, obviously it didn't stop there, because there was like heated discussion between both of them. It's like, oh, I guess you hate me. I guess sometimes I do. And it's like calling Doc selfish and stuff like that, which I guess Doc kind of throws back at her. It's like, oh, you're so, like, you really have the audacity to call me selfish? Oh, you think I moved your gun? Yeah, oh, you thought I was going to shoot you or something? The reason why you moved Peacemaker for me? So just a heated argument, but it made them kind of realize some things. It's like, yeah, that's how they really felt, but the doll just kind of forced them to kind of speak their truth. So Doc does give it to her, because she's like, I promise you, I won't break this until this is all said and done. The baby will be born. You will be by my side when it's done. Like, when we need to break this seal to get it all said and done. Because even Doc's like, the fact of the matter is, Clootie is the one person White could not put down. It's like you saw how much trouble she had putting down Bobo, like, and you can only assume Clootie is like the baddest of the bad, and he cannot be stopped. Side note, a quick thing about Clootie, didn't even realize that until last episode. They pointed it out. It's like, oh yeah, they're sister wives. They were all married, all three. Both the widows as well as Constance were married to Clootie. I guess that's why that's why the whole widow name exists. But I didn't pick that up last episode until they brought it up this episode. We're like, oh, sister wives. I'm like, okay, it makes sense now. Because at first I was like, no, he was married to Constance. That's their sister. Obviously, like, that's their in-laws. So it's like, no, those are sister wives. They were all married to him. So, oh, okay. I just didn't pick that up last episode. I just thought that was kind of something I feel like pointing out. But it's like, once again, like I brought it up before, it's like, we don't know what kind of tricks Clootie has up his sleeve. Like I said, everyone's got their own thing. Bubba's got the whole telekinetic thing he had going on. So another part of this episode was the reveal that Tucker's still alive. I mean, he was alive for a little while, and then he died because Beth ended up eating him. But still don't really quite understand why Tucker was so important. He referenced it in this episode, like, oh yeah, those fake sisters, because he ended up explaining it to Waverly, like, yeah, they're not really my sisters, they're just kind of wearing their faces, essentially. Basically, it seems like Beth is dead because Dolls ends up coming across one of them that's still alive. I'd assume that's Mercedes, but I could be wrong. But at very least, one of them is still alive, so. I also felt bad for Jeremy, because he's like, oh yeah, I worked on my device to kind of deal with their breath, and he ends up passing out the moment he takes it off. So either it's because he took it off and touched it, like if he had just left it on and not touched it, would it have been okay, or was it just, you know, it's still a work in progress. I feel like it might be a combination of the two, actually. But nevertheless, I hope Mercedes gets help. I mean, like, that sucks, like your face being ripped off. Maybe they could get it back from the widow that has that. Like I said, it seems like at the very least, there's one of them that's gone now. So, I mean, now it's two of the gardeners are going now because, you know, Tucker got eaten. Because it's like, oh yeah, Waverly's special, but too special for someone like you. So, I mean, like, there's so much to unpackage there in the episode. So, I mean, also along with all that, you had the situation with Rosita and Doc. It seems like Doc's not really giving her the attention. Like, it seems like, I think, you know, Rosita kind of feels like a third wheel amongst the whole situation, because it's like, oh, Wynonna and Doc, they had this baby, and it's like almost like she's coming second in the whole situation, because it's like, oh yeah, because, like, you know, Dolls had given her like a spa thing that she could take Doc too, but then like, oh, Doc's having dinner with Wynonna, but then her and Wynonna are kind of getting along, and now it's like, oh, that kind of gets complicated to the point you see Rosita being like, oh, you didn't say goodnight. He's just like, and Doc's like, oh, goodnight, and walked away. So it's like, is there really anything here? Is it, is it just casual? Are we boyfriend and girlfriend? He's the one that kind of pushed her to be like, hey, let's cool some boundaries between you and Wynonna, but nevertheless, I mean, I'll really quickly bring it up. We ended up finding out Rosita is in fact the Reverend. I was like, I figured as much, because it's like the whole line from Dot being like, don't worry, I'll protect you. And maybe that's why her and Wynonna didn't really gel well together, because Wynonna on some level sensed it without really realizing it. Because that made that whole like protecting you thing made a lot more sense in that regard. But I was like, but then I started thinking, is she not a Revenant? Because like nothing had come up yet. So I was like, maybe it's a situation like she's running from a shady past or something, and Doc is helping her with that. I don't know. Because I was also curious about it. She kind of went into it a little bit later on in the episode. I was like, what did you do that was so bad that you became a Revenant? Essentially, she got with the wrong person. She got with someone that was on Wyatt's target list, and it was just like, she's like, that literally worst second date ever. But her and Waverly started hanging out because obviously Waverly's got her issues with Nicole, which I'm like, Waverly's being very unfair to Nicole in my opinion. Because for one, first of all, she's still pissed about the whole like, oh, you keeping secrets from me. It's like, she's your girlfriend. Like, she wants to protect you. She loves you. She didn't want you to be hurt by that. And so, because she saw how much distress this whole situation put you under, and she didn't want you to be, I don't know, man. I just thought that just kind of sucks that she treats Nicole like that. But at the same time, it's like, you understand. It's like, this is something that's important to me. You had no business hiding from it. She's like, don't tell me what to think and how to feel, especially with the whole Tucker situation, because Beth is there. She's asking all these questions. She's like, oh gosh, well, oh, this is my poor brother Tucker, which is kind of interesting. I was thinking like multiple ideas about the whole situation. I was like, oh, did Tucker really just die off screen like that? Huh? And then Tucker appeared later on. I'm like, okay, did one of the widows take his face for whatever reason? I was like, oh yeah, and they burned his body to cover up or something. But it was like, no, it's just Tucker ended up killing someone that picked him up, which is kind of a shame. And he's like all frostbitten and stuff. But getting back to it, like, Nicole was very harsh about it. It's like, the way you're like, because like Beth is like, oh, Tucker really loves you, Waverly, in his own way. Yes, he wasn't like the most cool great person, but he was like, my brother loved you in his own way and stuff like that. And Nicole's like, no, he was a creep and stuff like that. And Waverly's like, her brother was on the like table, and she's like, you didn't see he kidnapped a girl and was literally pretending her to be you and everything. Like, it's like, you gotta give Nicole some credit there. It's like a creepo kidnapped a lady and is fantasizing that same lady that he kidnapped is your girlfriend. And I was like, you be a little defensive. You kind of say like, hey, fuck that dude in that circumstance. But like I said, I feel like Waverly should cut Nicole some slack. It's just like, she was just protecting you because she loves you. But her and, still pissed and everything, her and Rosita kind of go to the spa and chill out and everything. And, I thought that was kind of interesting just from a science perspective. I would assume that there's some truth to that. The whole like explanation of like bubbles in champagne, like that is actually a defect that, because things are imperfect, it leads to champagne being bubbly and stuff, just because of things in the champagne as well as the glass's shape and stuff like. I just like, oh, that's so fascinating. And basically said like, because Waverly's always been the perfect person. She kind of let slip a little bit like why she's pissed at Nicole and everything about the family situation. But like, that's the thing, like Waverly's always been perfect, and now we kind of understand more on why she was perfect, because she always strived to get her family's attention, but it was never enough. Now she kind of understands why her family never really gave her the time of the day, and it's like, oh, I'm not really one of a part of the family. I'm not an Earp. But Rosita's like, you don't have to be perfect. Like, there are some things that wouldn't exist without, imperfection or defects, So, and then in that moment, Waverly kissed her. Part of me was wondering, I was like, I was like, no, maybe I'm overthinking. And they kissed. I was like, never mind. I was right to kind of feel like something was happening there. And it's like, whoa, what are you doing? Oh, I'm with Nicole. Yeah, and I'm with Doc. And it's like, yeah, I'm a go. It's like, oh, dude. At first I was like, is this going to turn into another love triangle? Like, this show loves its love triangle, because there was the Doc and Doll situation, but it seems, I don't know whether there's still anything there with, I think Doc will always have feelings and care for Wynonna, but I don't know if there's a romantic sense because of the whole Doll situation. But then that kind of got a little complicated there. But then it seems like that was just a one-off thing. I was like, is something going to come about that? I was like, I doubt you're going to tell Nicole about that. I was like, because it would kind of suck if you like start falling for Rosita, because she's like, oh yeah, like the whole conversation of like, because Waverly ended up kind of texting some. She was very harsh when she was texting Nicole, and she immediately regretted it. She's like, "Oh, why did I do that?" It's like, "Yep." Rosita's like, "Yeah, too much backbone right there." So, but also the conversation came up about like, "Oh, like, so you're gonna give me a head start when you tell Wynonna?" It's like, "I'm not going to tell Wynonna." It's like, "Why aren't you?" It's like, for one, you're pretty cool, so like, I don't want her to kill you. Which the fact is, she's a revenant, so she's going to have to be put down eventually if this means stopping the whole family curse. I mean, then again, if they kill Clutie and the curse is done because it's kind of his fault and everything, what does happen to the rest of the revenants? That does become a interesting plot line. But it's like, yeah, the reason why I'm not going to tell her is because I think I might be half human, half revenant. I was like, I called it. I knew it. There's too much for them to be like, oh yeah, there's this rumor of this half human, half revenant. And I'm like, because initially I was like, okay, maybe Waverly is a gardener. I thought that might have been the thing. But then like the moment they brought that up, I was like, so that's going to be like Waverly's storyline, or like maybe that's also why she was able to fight it, like the thing that was inside her for so long, like kind of can't gain some control back, was because of that. Like the fact is that she's not 100% human, which is like, dude, it's like, that's kind of trippy on its own. It's like, it's hard enough finding out you're adopted and having family issues and stuff like that, but on top of it, you're like, I might not even be 100% human, so if I talk to her about you, I might as well spill the beans about me, and I'm not sure I'm really ready to have that conversation. You know, she's just dealing with the whole, like, we're not even technically sister situation, so that's kind of hard enough to deal with. It's kind of sad because Waverly's kind of like got all this weight on her shoulder just because, I mean, that's something she even admits to Rosita. It's like, I haven't even told Nicole this. And it's like, I mean, because I'm sure on some level she probably like fear that Nicole might look at her differently, and maybe she would. But at the end of the day, you're still Waverly, no matter what the situation may be, no matter who you are the same Waverly you've always been. Yes, you might know a little bit more about your background, and maybe there's some depths to you we haven't really scratched yet. Once again, we're making it seem like the only actual normal person amongst the group now is Nicole. Technically Wynonna, but even Wynonna's quote-unquote freak. Doc's kind of a freak because of the whole, like, him living a long time. So it's like, no one in this particular case is normal. But immediately getting back to the point, my brain goes back to what I said last episode. I still think that her mom was her mom. So they all share the same mom. She's not an Earp because they didn't have the same dad. Because her mom, because I remember what Wynonna says, she's like, mom referred to you as our angel. So it's like, there. But at the same time, it's like, oh, I think, I could be wrong, but last episode it just kind of stuck in my mind. It's got to be Bobo. Bobo's got to be the dad, especially the reason why he cares so much about Waverly. Especially now that I'm thinking about it even more, like the name Waverly, why he gave her that name is because it's stuck inside of his head because of Wynonna's like spirit vision quest last episode, and like messing almost like, I guess you could argue, like the space-time continuum, whatever that was. Maybe it's like the crossover between life and death, it like was so thin that they were able to cross paths like that, and it messed with time, you know, in its weird way, messed with time and everything. So, and I believe that even more so because of the whole like him coming back last episode thing, which is kind of interesting that he didn't pop up at all. Like nothing was like he never really popped up in the episode. I thought it was kind of interesting. So I don't know. I feel like that's what that reveal is going to be. I think I mentioned this last episode, but I'll reiterate it, which is going to make, like, the fact is, if Bobo really is Waverly's dad, it's going to make that Willa situation even more weird and awkward, because it's like, because he'd be dating his daughter's half-sister, and then that kind of gets even murkier because of the whole, like, where Robert and Wyatt were, like, being close friends. But then again, you can make the same argument considering the whole Doc and Wynonna situation. So, I mean, that adds a weird level of something else to it, too, as well. So overall, a very good episode with some interesting twists and turns. I'm still very curious, like, because, you know, I talked about it earlier, like, Tucker, you know, like, that Beth was kind of like, oh, you're, basically, Beth would be like, you're an abomination that's not worth being around Waverly because she's something special. So it's like, she senses or knows something about that, which is something I completely forgot to talk about, too, is that Beth and Mercedes, the widow, them are like working separately now too, like all for the purpose of getting Clutie back. But I guess it's a situation of like, oh, we're not doing this, such as like, no, you go, you know, no, I want Clutie all to myself type of thing. I don't know. But it's like, what do they want from Waverly? What can they get from Waverly that they would need? I mean, if this whole thing turns out to be true about the whole half revenant, half human thing, then I'm curious what that will be. I mean, and we even have the widow Mercedes going to Nicole. So like, I guess Nicole kind of will act as bait because now she knows that she probably knows that Wynonna has the final seal. Probably doesn't know about it being a rain, but using a little bit of her magic, she'll be like, oh yeah, so I'm not sure. The things are just definitely going to get very interesting next episode. More secrets, more reveals, more interesting twists. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.